So today I want to go over an incredibly strong poison landslide build for the Druid in Season 2 of Diablo 4. This build is also going to be using the new unique Malignant Ring for the Druid that I think makes this build stronger and more enjoyable to play. So the biggest change with this version of the build compared to my last version is the addition of the new unique Malignant Rings that were just added to Season 2. Now the special of this ring is when casting an ultimate skill, and again 5 seconds after, you pull in distant enemies and deal some amount of base physical damage to them. The damage of this is increased by 1% per 1 point of willpower you have, and this is multiplicative, so even just getting a few additional willpower can massively increase the damage of this proc. Now this, as it stands in this build right now, is really good. The pool is pretty ridiculous in AoE situations, just pulling everything to you 2 separate times. You pull everything to you, you poison creeper, it does a bunch of landslides, and everything dies, and that's not even accounting for the damage. And with this current version of the build, without all of our buffs up that we get through combat, just doing some testing on the target dummies, this proc, when it crits, was hitting upwards of 300,000 damage, usually around 200 to 250k. Once you get more buffs from being in combat and having more of our damage amplify, this was doing upwards of 300,000. And the base roll I have isn't actually that good. So at 882 item level, this can roll up to 3,900 base damage, and I do think getting, say, a 925 version of this and get the highest roll, I think the base roll of this can get to probably around 5,000 base physical damage, which is ridiculous because that would close to double the damage this is dealing. And then I think if I optimize this build more, I can get 900 willpower, because if you get the willpower percent roll on your necklace as a max roll, so over 10%, and I get a better percent willpower roll on this new ring, which is currently close to 16%, and I get some better rolls for my willpower on my helmet and my weapon, I think I could very easily get 900 willpower, which would be another over 100% multiplicative damage increase to the damage of this unique ring. So I think if I optimize this build more for this, I think the damage proc of this ring I could probably get to over 500,000 crits, which would be pretty ridiculous, and that's not even accounting for pulling everything together, which is arguably the strongest part of this ring. And as mentioned, this is a landslide build, so a lot of the most important aspects are everything that gives you more landslides. We get landslides from our trample, we get landslides from our poison creeper, we spawn more landslides, and then with our most important legendary aspect, which goes on your necklace, when your Nature's Fury key passive procs, your non-ultimate skills of the opposite type are reduced. So we're getting massive cooldown reductions, spawning landslides everywhere, and now we're doing a ton of extra damage and can pull enemies in. And that brings us to our skill tree, starting with Storm Strike. Now we do actually have to use this primarily to proc a bunch of our other effects and get resets. We'll also get some pretty good damage reduction 100% of the time because we're using this so much. Then upgrade 1 can just immobilize enemies to get us lower in the tree. 5 into landslide, this is our main damage dealer, but this isn't actually going to be on our bar. We're procking this through a bunch of our other abilities. Upgrade 1, when landslide hits an enemies a certain amount of times, the next one will immobilize enemies. Upgrade 2, when you immobilize or stun an enemy, you gain a terror mote. Each enemy hit by landslide will consume a terror mote, causing it to be a guaranteed crit and deal more critical damage, and this just has a 10% chance to proc against bosses. Then we have Earthen Bulwark, just another defensive, gives us barrier, it resets a ton, so we get a ton of tankiness from this. Upgrade 1 makes us unstoppable. Upgrade 2 causes it to explode and deal damage, and since we're constantly resetting this, we'll be reapplying this before the first one ends, which will also cause the second upgrade to proc when we reapply Earthen Bulwark. Then Poison Creeper, this is primarily to poison enemies, and it'll proc a bunch of landslides. Upgrade 1 increases the immobilization of it. Upgrade 2 gives us increased crit chance against enemies that are hit by Poison Creeper, so a bunch of extra crit. Then we're taking Hurricane, primarily to proc a bunch of other effects. Upgrade 1 slows enemies, upgrade 2 causes enemies to deal less damage. This will also help us to get more of our cooldown resets. Then we're taking Trample, which will give us unstoppable. It'll also spawn more waves of our landslides. Upgrade 1 causes it to do more damage the less enemies you hit, so Trample can actually do pretty decent damage against a boss when you're only hitting one target. Then we're going down, we're taking Petrify as our ultimate, which stuns all enemies in an area, and you deal increased critical strike damage to them. And against bosses, the critical strike damage is increased and the duration is increased. Upgrade 1 increases Petrify's effects, and since we are using that new unique ring we went over, we want an ultimate that we can use frequently, and that isn't something like Grizzly Rage that we sit in for a long time. With all of our cooldown reduction, this has a 25-second cooldown at a base now, and we have other ways to reduce it, so we'll be using this thing all the time. Then our capstone is Nature's Fury. When you cast an Earth skill, you have a 30% chance to trigger a free Storm skill, and vice versa. In addition, these free skills count both as Earth and Storm skills, and this mixed with our legendary aspect on our necklace we went over, anytime this procs, our opposite skills will have their cooldown almost fully reset. And then next up we have our passives. Heart of the Wild to get 3 into Wild Impulses. Your core skills cost more, but deal massively increased damage. We don't actually spend any spirit in this build, so this is just a free damage increase. Also have 3 in our necklace, very strong for increased damage. 3 into Predatory Instinct, increased crit chance against close enemies. 3 into Iron Fur for damage reduction while in Werebear and 3 seconds after. And Trample is the only thing that puts us in Werebear, but we get it so much that this will be procced a lot of the time. Then 3 into Ancestral Fortitude, increase your resistances by 15%. 3 into Vigilance, when we pop a defensive, we get damage reduction. We'll be using Earthern Bulwark all the time. Then 3 into Crushing Earth, Earth skills deal more damage to CC'd enemies. 1 into Safeguard, critical strikes with Earth skills fortify you for 2% of your base life. This will basically give us 100% fortify all the time. We hit so many different Earth skills, and a lot of them are critting. Then Stone Guard, while you have fortify over 50% of your max life, your Earth skills deal increased damage. Then 1 into Neurotoxin to get 3 into Envenom. You and your companions deal increased critical strike damage against poison enemies, and Poison Creeper is going to be poisoning everything. Then 3 into Defiance, nature skills deal increased damage to elites. 2 into Natural Disaster, your Earth skills deal more damage to vulnerable, your Storm skills deal increased damage to stunned enemies. And then Resonance, nature skills deal increased damage. Triple this if your Earth skill is the next skill after a Storm skill, and vice versa, and we'll constantly be going back and forth between the two, so this is just a really big damage increase. And then next up we have our Spirit Boons. Wariness, take reduced damage against elites. Sight Talons for increased critical strike chance. Calamity to extend the duration of Petrify, so either extend the stun or extend just the duration for more crit damage against bosses. And if you don't want this, you can also change this to other buffs. You could go increased critical strike damage, you could go increased life, and any of those options are going to be good. You could even do increased attack speed, so you can Storm Strike more for more resets. Then we have Pack Leader. It's a lucky hit. Critical strikes have up to a 20% chance to reset the cooldown of your companion skills. This is to reset Poison Creeper, and it can reset itself. All the landslides you spawn with Poison Creeper can reset itself, so you can definitely keep getting luck and just spam out Poison Creeper after Poison Creeper. Then finally, Calm Before the Storm, another lucky hit. Nature skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate. Our ultimate's already super low cooldown, so 10 procs of this actually fully reset your Petrify. Since time's going in between, you really only need a handful of Calm Before the Storm procs, and you'll have Petrify up in like 10 seconds. Sometimes I've had Petrify in under 5 seconds because I got so many procs of this, so incredibly strong. And then next up we have our Vampiric Powers, starting with Undying. Casting a skill heals you for 3% of your life. Double this if below 50%. This is our main form of healing. Then we have Sanguine Brace. When you kill an enemy, you fortify. We don't really need that, but when we have more than half of our life is fortified, we gain 8% increased crit strike chance, which is really big. Now there is other options to remove Sanguine Brace for. One of the ones I think I'm going to start testing out to see if it's good is Ravenous, which is a lucky hit, up to a 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your move speed. This would be around 50% for this build right now, and that could actually be massive because the more you Storm Strike, the more resets of Earthen Bulwark and Trample you get, which will also help get even more resets of Poison Creeper, which will then feed back into getting more resets of Hurricane, which will just give you more resets of everything overall. So it could be better to go Ravenous, but I think I'll need to test some of that. Then we have a Cursed Touch, another lucky hit, up to a 44% chance to inflict Vampiric Curse on enemies, and it has a chance to spread. And then when we release Stored Souls, they do massively increased damage, but this is mixed with Prey on the Weak. You deal increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and any enemy inflicted with Vampiric Curse is also vulnerable. So these two gives us basically permanent vulnerable on everything. Then finally we have Anticipation. Your ultimate skills gain 20% cooldown reduction. That's all we care about for this, so we can use Petrify all the time. And that brings us to our Paragon boards. Now this is a work in progress, but I think this board is pretty good right now, and we're primarily going to be going over our board selection and our glyph selection. There'll be a build planner in the description if you want to follow point by point. So starting off, we have Tectonic. Increased critical strike chance with Earth skills, but what's very important is the secondary effect. 15% increase the lucky hit chance. We have tons of lucky hit in this build, so you want this to just get a lot more procs of all of that. Then we're going up, we're taking the Heightened Malice board. While 3 or more enemies are poisoned nearby, you deal massively increased damage, one of the best legendary nodes in the game. Then we're going up and taking the Undaunted glyph. Increased damage while fortified, damage reduction while fortified. And also something I should mention, I don't have any of my glyphs at 21 yet. I've been been leveling up a bunch of different characters, and glyphs are slacking on every single character. Most other people, this is probably the case for, but if you're leveling up glyphs, try to get them to 15 at least, but I could get a ton more power through getting all my glyphs to 21. Then we're going over to the left, we're taking Earthen Devastation. Your Earth skills deal increased critical strike damage, and this effect is increased based on your damage versus crowd controlled. Mine is 20% right now. I could get a little bit more getting a roll on my weapon, which is probably something that would optimize the build a little bit. Then the glyph we're taking is Spirit, more critical strike damage, and when you crit an enemy, they take increased damage from you, stacking up to 12%. So just massively increase crit damage and just increase overall damage. Then we're going up, we're taking Ancestral Guidance. We're not taking the legendary node itself, but we are taking Earth and Sky. Now this will buff all the magic nodes within range, and the secondary effect, your nature skills deal increased damage to crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies, and these type of glyphs are very good for getting increased to resistances. As you see, I have increased to all resistances. We have a bunch of core damage off this, and this is really good to get more dexterity and intelligence, so you can get the secondary effect of a lot of the rare nodes throughout the boards. And the main thing you want to aim for is to have the secondary effect of most of your rare nodes throughout the boards. It's usually your last 1 or 2 boards where you can't get the secondary effect because it requires too much stats. Also make sure to go up and get the increased core skill damage from these rare and magic nodes, tons of extra damage from that. Then we're going over to the right and we're taking the Constricting Tendrils board, and the glyph we're taking is Territorial. Increased damage to close enemies, damage reduction from close enemies. And then next up we have our gems and legendary aspects. On your weapons you want crit damage to vulnerable enemies. In your gear you want damage reduction while fortified. You could also take max life. I know a lot of people have been going more into max life, but I like the damage reduction while fortified. And then on your jewelry you want whatever is going to make sure you have all of your resistances capped. So I have 2 gems to increase our resistance to all elements, and then if you have any extra slots you put armor in those. So starting off we went over our legendary ring, and our necklace legendary aspect we went over, which is the most important part of the build, and other offensive legendary aspects can go on any of our other slots. So on our ring we have landslides, earth pillars, each strike a second time and deal increased damage. So this means when we poison creeper, it spawns a circle of landslides around us. It'll do that twice. When we landslide, it'll fill up the whole screen with landslides and do a second wave. Then on our offhand, your core skills deal up to 40% increase in multiplicative damage based on our fortify, so just massive damage increase. On our weapon, Trample now summons 6 landslide pillars, each doing 80% of normal damage. Trample is now a nature and earth skill, so Trample now has a bunch of additional scaling and will spawn massive waves of landslides. Then on our gloves, Poison Creeper now casts landslide and circle around us, and earth skills deal more damage to poison enemies. So Poison Creeper will poison enemies, also make us deal more damage. Then for our defensive aspects, increase the duration of Earthen Bulwark by 6 seconds. In addition, killing enemies replenishes some of Earthen Bulwark's barrier. Just for more defensive, we constantly are spamming Earthen Bulwark. On our chest piece, basic skills grant damage reduction for up to 6 seconds. We'll be spamming our Storm Strike, so we'll have massive damage reduction at all times. Then on our legs, Disobedience, percent armor scaling. This will just allow us to get to basically 100% increased armor. And then on our boots, I'm currently using WoW Unstoppable in 4 seconds after. You gain 25% increased movement speed and can move through enemies. You can also use the aspect that gives you +2 ranks to your skills while fortified. I just like this because it gives us more speed, and we have Fortify off Trample and Earthen Bulwark, and those will reset all the time, so just some pretty big movement speed increases. And then finally, we have our gear stats. So starting off with our helmets, we have willpower, basic skill attack speed is actually really good, total armor, cooldown reduction. All really good rolls. You could also change out total armor with any other defensive. Then on our chest piece, you want all damage reduction from fortified, from poison, from distance, from close. Any damage reduction going to be good. On your gloves, you want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, ranks a landslide, and any other damage roll. You could do attack speed so you can storm strike more, crit damage with earth skills, or just crit damage. Any other damage roll is going to be good. On your legs, you want all damage reduction again. Damage reduction from fortified, from close. I like damage reduction while injured because it's a very high damage reduction roll. And then dodge chance or dodge chance versus close or from distant. Then on your boots, you want move speed, any dodge chance roll, a damage reduction while injured roll, and then any other damage reduction roll. I have fire resistance. This is actually a useless roll for me right now, so I need a good boot upgrade. And if you're level 100 and followed my Paragon board, you really don't need any resistance roll on any of these pieces. Then on our weapon, we want willpower, core skill damage, and then any other damage roll. Basically, I think changing vulnerable for like a damage increase to close. You also have critical strike damage or critical strike damage with earth skills. So just any other damage roll, you're going to be fine. Then in your offhand, you want basic skill attack speed, really good roll so you can storm strike more, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction. I have spear cost reduction. That's useless in this build. I would want either critical strike chance or damage reduction while fortified or damage reduction from poisoned. Then Then on our necklace, you want percent willpower, cooldown reduction, ranks to wild impulses is really good, or you can get ranks to something like crushing earth. And then I have damage reduction while poisoned is really good, or damage reduction while fortified. Then on our ring, you want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, max life, and pretty much any other damage roll, critical strike damage with earth skills, any other damage roll gonna be good. And then as we went over, we have our unique ring that you can change your rolls on. But that's the entirety of this build. Incredibly strong build, and the new unique ring makes the build more fun. Doing a bunch more damage when popping it, having ultimate skill cooldown reduction on the ring itself is really good, having a bunch more willpower is really good, and then pulling everything to you is just incredibly enjoyable for clearing out dungeons or clearing out non-boss enemies. Like I mentioned, I think I can optimize this build a lot and make this new unique rings proc deal massively increased damage. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.
must wait a moment. I'm not ready yet. I must wait a moment. I must wait a moment.